In April of 1815, a mountain on a forgotten island erases an entire year from the calendar of the world. Far from Europe, far from the empires that write the history books, the largest eruption in modern memory begins. The sky above 3 continents will soon forget the color blue, and almost no one understands the reason why. Harvests fail on the far side of the planet, and farmers blame the heavens without knowing the true cause. A single volcano speaks once, and the consequences travel farther than any army or navy ever could in that age. The year that follows arrives without a summer, and the world searches for an explanation it cannot yet find. This is the story of how one distant island quietly changes the temperature of the entire living Earth. What the official history rarely tells is that the Great Cold of 1816 begins thousands of miles away, in silence. How can a single mountain reach across vast oceans and freeze the green fields it will never once see? Why do poets, painters, and farmers all sense a strange shadow falling across the world in the very same year? The link between an Indonesian island and a frozen European harvest stays hidden for many long generations. Behind the famine and the migrations lies one event that science would not fully understand for a whole century. To understand the year without a summer, we must first travel to the ordinary world that existed before the silence. The answer waits buried beneath ash, in a place few maps of the time ever bothered to name or remember. In the early 19th century, Sumbawa sits at the busy crossroads of a vast and prosperous maritime world. The Dutch East Indies stretch across thousands of scattered islands, rich in spices, sandalwood, and trade. Merchant ships move endlessly between ports, carrying goods that will eventually reach kitchens across Europe. On Sumbawa itself, small kingdoms thrive in the long shadow of a towering peak the people simply call Tambora. The mountain rises more than 4,000 meters, green and silent, watched over by patient farming villages. Rice terraces climb its lower slopes, and the soil, enriched by old eruptions, richly rewards those who work it. The people speak their own language, trade their own honey and horses, and govern their own daily affairs. To them, the mountain is a familiar giant, a part of the horizon as constant and trusted as the sea itself. The kingdoms of Sumbawa send their famed horses and fragrant honey to markets scattered all across the region. The island lies within a great chain of volcanoes, formed where the colliding plates of the earth grind together. Beneath this region, oceanic crust dives deep into the planet, feeding the hidden fire of countless mountains. Tambora is one of many such peaks, yet its long slumber has lulled the islanders into a deep and quiet trust. Across the ocean, Europe is exhausted, emerging slowly from decades of revolution, upheaval, and constant war. Napoleon has only just been defeated, and the continent is rebuilding its fragile economies and shifting borders. In North America, settlers push westward, clearing forests and planting crops on uncertain and lonely frontiers. The global climate in these years already balances on a delicate edge after a cool and unstable era of weather. Nobody connects these distant worlds, yet a single invisible thread is about to bind them together forever. For untold centuries, Tambora has slept, its inner fire pressing slowly against thick layers of ancient rock. Beneath the peaceful green surface, immense pressure builds in chambers of molten stone that no one can see. The mountain has not erupted in living memory, and the villages trust the long silence beneath their feet. The world of 1815 believes that the ground beneath it is solid, and that the sky above it is reliably fixed. That comfortable belief is about to be tested by a force far older and greater than any kingdom on the map. In the first days of April, the mountain stirs at last, and a deep trembling moves through the whole island. On the 5th of April, A sound like distant cannon fire rolls across the sea toward the neighboring islands. Sailors far away believe a battle is underway, and ships are sent to search for an enemy that does not exist. For several days, the rumbling continues, and the people of Sumbawa watch the looming peak with growing unease. The first great explosions tear loose rock from the summit and fling it far out across the trembling open sea. Then, on the evening of the 10th of April, the mountain awakens with a violence that defies all imagination. 3 columns of fire rise from the summit and merge into a single towering pillar of light, smoke, and ash. The eruption hurls its material upward to a height of more than 40 kilometers into the darkening sky. Burning ash and molten rock race down the slopes faster than any living creature could ever hope to flee. Within only hours, the villages nearest the mountain vanish completely beneath the weight of the falling earth. The sound of the eruption travels more than 2,000 kilometers, clearly heard across many distant islands. So great is the roar that garrisons hundreds of miles away prepare their soldiers to repel an invading enemy. The sea itself responds, as great waves surge outward and strike the coastlines of the surrounding islands. Ash falls so thickly that day turns into night, and the sun disappears entirely behind a heavy curtain of gray. Pumice and ash rain down across a region larger than many of the proud nations of distant Western Europe. Roofs collapse beneath the crushing weight of accumulated ash, even on islands far from the mountain itself. For those nearby, the entire world shrinks to falling stone, choking darkness and a heat that bends the air. Survivors describe a darkness so complete that they cannot see their own hands held closely before their faces. When the mountain finally falls quiet, its proud summit is gone, more than a kilometer of solid rock erased. Where a towering green peak once stood, only a vast and smoking crater now remains against the empty sky. The kingdoms at the foot of the mountain are simply gone, their people and culture buried in a single instant. An entire language vanishes that night, spoken nowhere else on the whole earth, lost beneath the heavy ash. Across Sumbawa and the nearby islands, thousands lose their lives in the harsh days that follow the eruption. Crops are smothered, wells are poisoned, and the once rich farmland turns into a gray and lifeless desert. Rain, mixed with thick ash, falls for days, and the survivors face deep hunger as their harvests disappear. Ships arriving in the following weeks find vast floating islands of pumice drifting across the open ocean. Some of these strange rafts of stone stretch kilometers wide, slowing every vessel that tries to cross. In the wider region, tens of thousands more lose their lives to famine and disease in the following months. The total loss across the islands climbs toward 70,000 people in the long aftermath of the event. Yet the world beyond these waters knows almost nothing of the true scale of what has just taken place here. News travels slowly in 1815, carried by sail across many months of ocean before reaching the distant capitals. By the time the reports finally arrive in Europe, the tragedy is reduced to a brief and distant curiosity. No one suspects that the ash from this island will soon touch every single life in the Northern Hemisphere. For high above the earth, an invisible cloud has already begun a journey that will circle the entire planet. The eruption has injected enormous amounts of sulphurous gas far up into the upper layers of the atmosphere. There, far beyond the reach of weather, that gas slowly transforms into a veil of tiny reflective droplets. These droplets scatter incoming sunlight back into space before it can ever warm the surface far below. Carried by powerful high winds, the veil spreads east and west until it wraps the globe in a faint, pale haze. The veil drifts silently overhead, utterly indifferent to the borders and kingdoms passing beneath it. High-altitude winds spread the haze until both hemispheres lie quietly beneath the same dimming gray shroud. From the ground, The change is subtle at first, noticed only in the strange new colors of the evening sky. Even in distant Asia and the Americas, observers note that the moon and stars seem strangely veiled and dim. Sunsets across Europe begin to burn in deep shades of crimson, orange, and violet rarely ever seen before. Painters notice the spectacle, and some capture these glowing skies on canvas without knowing their true source. The light itself seems altered, softened, and dimmed, as if the world has slipped behind a thin gray curtain. Through the autumn and winter, the veil thickens, quietly stealing precious warmth from the entire planet. By the spring of 1816, the strange cooling reaches a point that ordinary people can no longer simply ignore. Across Europe and North America, the seasons begin to behave in ways that openly defy all living memory. In May, frost creeps across the fields that should already be turning green with the first growth of the year. In June, snow falls across New England, blanketing the crops that farmers have only just managed to plant. Lakes and rivers freeze in midsummer, and ice forms on water that should be warm beneath the high summer sun. The bitter cold returns again and again, killing each new attempt to grow food before it can ever mature. Farmers replant their fields 3 and 4 times, only to watch each fragile harvest wither in the deep chill. In the mountains of Europe, brown and reddish snow falls, strangely stained by the distant volcanic dust. People stare at the discolored snow with rising fear, certain that some dark omen has fallen upon the land. The summer that never truly arrives soon earns a grim and lasting name across the suffering countryside. They call it the year without a summer, and the bitter memory will outlive everyone who has to endure it. As the harvests fail across the world, the price of grain climbs higher than most families can ever afford. Bread becomes desperately scarce across Europe, and a creeping hunger spreads through cities and villages alike. In the countryside, families face impossible choices about how to feed their children through the long winter. Food shortages spark unrest, and crowds gather in the marketplaces demanding the grain that does not exist. Governments struggle to respond, importing food and opening granaries to calm the rising tide of desperation. In Switzerland and France, anxious crowds gather as the price of simple bread spirals far beyond their reach. Charities and parishes strain to feed the hungry as a long and merciless winter tightens its grip on the land. Some families survive on moss, roots, and whatever the frozen and hardened ground will reluctantly surrender. In some regions, the desperate poor leave their homes entirely, wandering the roads in search of any food at all. The hardship deepens existing tensions, and old social orders strain beneath the unfamiliar weight of famine. In Ireland and beyond, hunger weakens the population, and disease follows close behind the spreading famine. A wave of typhus moves across Europe, carried by the people wandering far in search of food and steady work. The crisis becomes the last great famine of its kind, ever to strike the heart of the prosperous Western world. In the German lands, the suffering is severe, and its memory shapes a whole generation of thinkers and reformers. A young chemist who lives through the hunger will later devote his entire life to feeding the world with science. His later work on fertilizers grows in part from the desperation he witnesses during these frozen, hungry years. Across the Atlantic, New England farmers watch their own land betray them through season after brutal season. Many give up entirely, packing their whole lives into wagons and turning their tired faces toward the open West. This great migration helps to populate the American interior, quietly reshaping the future map of a young nation. Whole new communities are born from the hard decision to abandon the fields that the cold has rendered useless. In the desperate search for solutions, even the way that ordinary people travel begins to change in strange ways. With oats grown too costly to feed the horses, An inventor in Germany imagines a clever machine to replace them. He builds a running machine of wood and iron, the distant and humble ancestor of the modern bicycle we know. A famine in the Far East Indies, in this strange way, quietly rolls a new invention onto the roads of Europe. Everywhere, the disaster forces people to adapt, to migrate, and to rethink how they will live and survive. Yet almost no one alive connects their own frozen fields to a single mountain on the far side of the world. While the poor struggle to merely survive, others find that the strange darkness deeply stirs the imagination. On the shores of a lake in Switzerland, a small group of riders finds itself trapped indoors by endless rain. The grim summer of 1816 keeps them inside for days, watching cold storms roll across a gray and restless sky. To pass the long and gloomy hours, they challenge one another to invent the most frightening tale they can. The eerie weather feeds a mood of dread, and rumors spread that the very end of the world itself may be near. From that strange, gloomy contest, one young woman conjures a story that will echo through the coming centuries. Her haunting tale of a creature stitched from death and brought to life becomes a true landmark of literature. The novel she begins to write in that sunless and frozen summer is known to the world today as Frankenstein. Another guest among them sketches the figure of an aristocratic predator who feeds upon the living by night. That dark fragment soon grows into the modern vampire, an idea that will haunt fiction for many generations. The darkness of the year without a summer thus gives birth to two of the most enduring legends of pure fear. One poet, gazing at the dimmed and dying light, writes of a desolate world where the sun itself goes out. His bleak verses imagine an earth abandoned by all warmth, frozen and silent beneath a lightless, empty sky. Far away in England, a great painter carefully studies the strange, glowing sunsets, stained by volcanic ash. His luminous skies, blazing with unnatural color, become some of the most celebrated art of the entire age. In this way, a single distant eruption seeps quietly into the paintings and poems of an entire generation. The disaster that ruins so many harvests also plants the unlikely seeds of stories we still eagerly tell today. Art and suffering intertwine, as the same haze that starves the fields inspires the very artists who survive it. Slowly and painfully, the great veil in the upper atmosphere finally begins to thin as the years move forward. By 1817 and beyond, the skies gradually clear, the harvests recover, and the worst of the deep hunger fades. The weary world exhales, returns to its old routines, and gradually forgets the true source of its long ordeal. The mountain that caused it all stands quiet once more, its name slowly slipping toward the edge of memory. For most of the 19th century, the link between the eruption and the cold remains stubbornly unproven. Only much later do scientists begin to understand how volcanic gas can chill the whole planet all at once. They learn that sulfur lofted into the upper atmosphere reflects sunlight for years after a major eruption. The cooling of 1816 becomes one of the clearest known examples of this powerful and far-reaching mechanism. Modern computer models recreate the eruption, tracing its cooling shadow across oceans and continents alike. By comparing it with later eruptions, researchers confirm how powerfully volcanoes can reshape the climate. Tree rings and ice cores would later record the eruption as a deep scar within the planet's own long memory. In the layers of polar ice, a sharp spike of sulfur marks the exact year the mountain spoke to the world. These natural archives allow scientists to read the eruption clearly, centuries after the ash finally settled. Measured by the sheer volume of material it expels, Tambora ranks among the greatest eruptions in millennia. It releases well over 100 cubic kilometers of shattered rock and ash, in only a matter of fleeting hours. The blast removes roughly a third of the entire mountain, lowering its lofty summit by more than a kilometer. The raw energy unleashed dwarfs that of the largest weapons that humanity would ever go on to build and test. Its cooling effect lowers global temperatures by a small but measurable fraction of a degree for several years. That tiny number hides an enormous truth, for even a slight chill can wreck the harvests of entire nations. The event teaches a lasting lesson about how truly fragile the delicate balance of the global climate can be. Centuries later, dedicated researchers returned to Sumbawa to uncover the lost world that the ash had preserved. Beneath the hardened earth, they find an entire village, frozen forever in the moment of its final fatal day. Houses, tools, and traces of daily life slowly emerge, sealed away like a Pompeii of the warm eastern seas. The discovery returns names and faces to a people that the wider world had almost entirely forgotten existed. The buried village offers a rare and haunting window into a vanished way of life on the slopes of the peak. Through their recovered story, the human cost of the eruption finally takes its place within recorded history. The mountain that erased a culture also, in time, faithfully preserves the memory of that culture in stone. Scientists now study Tambora not as a mere curiosity, but as a clear warning written across the whole planet. They use it to model how a single eruption can ripple outward through agriculture, economies, and societies. The frozen year reveals how tightly the fate of distant peoples is woven into one single shared atmosphere. What begins as a local catastrophe ends as a profound global lesson in the deep interconnection of all life. Consider the true scale of it all. One mountain, one night. A whole planet plunged into a year of darkness. 70,000 lives lost. A vanished kingdom. A lost language buried forever beneath the falling gray ash. Failed harvests on 3 continents. Famine across Europe. Migration over the wild and lonely American frontier. New legends born of the gloom. New inventions forced from sheer need. One eruption reshaping the entire world. All of it flows outward from one single peak on one small island that most of the world had never even heard of. And so the mystery of the frozen year is finally solved, though it took science more than a century to see it. The famine, the migrations, and the masterpieces all trace directly back to that single eruption of early 1815. The link between an Indonesian island and a frozen European winter was real, hidden far up in the silent sky. A thin veil of volcanic haze had wrapped the entire Earth and quietly stolen a single summer from all humanity. The world that emerged afterward was permanently marked by the strange year the seasons failed to ever arrive. Borders of settlement shifted, science advanced, and literature gained 2 of its most haunting, lasting figures. One eruption rewrote farming, migration, art, and even the very understanding of the living planet itself. The mountain proved that no place on Earth is ever too distant to change the daily lives of everyone else. From a single mountain came hunger and art, migration and invention, all woven into one extraordinary year. Today, scientists carefully watch a handful of supervolcanoes capable of dwarfing even the great fury of Tambora. They know that another vast eruption could one day chill the planet and gravely threaten the world's harvests. More recent eruptions have briefly cooled the planet, quietly confirming the harsh lesson Tambora first taught. Strangely, some researchers now even propose copying the volcano, seeding the sky to cool a steadily warming Earth. The idea of injecting reflective particles high into the atmosphere directly echoes the very mechanism of 1815. It raises a profound question about whether humanity should reach for the powerful levers a volcano once pulled. The same science born from studying Tambora now guides our anxious watch over a warming and crowded world. The frozen year quietly reminds us that the climate connects every single nation, whether we intend it or not. Have we truly learned how delicate that balance really is? Or are we still gambling with forces we barely grasp? Follow along to uncover more of the hidden moments when a single event quietly reshaped our entire human world.